Want to master typographic animations in After Effects? How about something like this? Well, it's actually really easy to create. I'm Jess for Envato Elements. I'm a professional graphic and motion designer, and keep watching and I'll show you how to animate this sweet little text animation. We'll learn how to block and refine an animation with the perfect easing, manipulate text parts to your liking, and apply some neat final effects to bring it all together. These animations are super fun to watch and to make, so let's make yours. Okay, everybody, welcome to After Effects. I have set up already a little composition here with a design that we're going to animate today. And it's pretty simple. I designed this first in Illustrator and then used Overlord to bring it over, but if you don't have that, you can just drag it in as an Illustrator file. And then you're going to create shapes from your text. So I'll just show you quickly how to do this as well, because you can also do it with text native to After Effects. So if I've got a piece of text here that is an actual text layer that's editable, in order for us to animate it the way that we want to, it needs to be a path. So you can outline that text in Illustrator before you bring it in, or you can right click and go create shapes from text. Now, the only other thing is that for this project, I think it'd be easier to have your text separated onto different layers. There's a few plugins you can use to do this. There's one called Explode Shape Layers. But the easiest way probably is to just bring it over from Illustrator already ungrouped, like these. Or you can copy out these groups. It's a bit of a tedious process though, so maybe don't do it that way if you can avoid it. Okay, cool. So we brought our type in. The first thing that we're going to do is center our anchor points and get this ready to animate. And we're going to create some nulls and some groups and start blocking our animation out. So firstly, we want, if I show you maybe I'll show you the example comp of what we're going to have at the end of this. This is the animation that we're aiming for. So there's quite a lot of scaling and quite a lot of offsetting animation, and you can see that these all scale up sort of from the bottom first, like that. So in our new comp, where our points are right now is not going to scale from the bottom of the text. So all we have to do is go through and recenter these, and you can use this pan behind tool to do it. And I think if I can stay selected, it's good to do it manually in this case, because each letter here has a slightly different point. You kind of just want it to be the bottom, because we're on a slant as well. You want it to be the bottom here. And you can use any font you like in any color for this project. I recommend choosing a font that you can kind of clearly see where you might edit it. For instance, you probably don't want to choose a font that is too skinny, because then it's going to be really hard to pull the paths away from each other. And you probably don't want to choose a font that's got too many decorative elements. So keep it simple, basically, is the way to go. So that's all our anchor points. Then move to the sort of center bottom of each of these letters, which is exactly what we want to do. So the next thing we're going to do, now that our anchor points are centered, they're already centered on our sunbursts nicely, so that's fine. We're going to bring in some nulls and start parenting. So we'll call this first null our global scale, because it's going to affect the text and also our sunbursts. Basically everything gets affected by this. So we've got that one, and then you can parent the sunbursts to that. And then we're also going to create another null, which is going to be our text scale, and that's going to allow us a little bit more control over our text, and we're going to parent that to the global scale as well. And then we're going to make a null for each individual word, and we're going to center that null to the word as well. So this will be day, and we'll select the letters for day and parent that. And I'm going to make this one a different color as well. And then I'm just going to duplicate that null, move it down so that it's near 4. And then select all of these, go to 4. Day for it, by the way, is a common phrase that my friend, I only have one friend. My friends and I will often say to each other when it is a nice day outside. I don't know if it's purely Australian slang or if it's made it elsewhere. Let me know in the comments. Cool. Okay, so now if we open up the scales on this, we've got day moving individually, we've got for all moving, and we've got it moving as well. And then they all, oh no, sorry, we missed one. All of these ones, these day for it word nulls, we're going to parent to the text scale. So now they all move together, blah, blah, blah. And then the global scale affects everything. Yay, we've got this nice little rig that was quite easy to do. Cool. So what we want to do is make this animation loop, because if it loops, it's just more fun to watch and a bit more bouncy. And I think we'll start with the end, because sometimes that's easier to start with when this is our kind of our end frame that we have right here. You saw in the one that I had prepared earlier, we start close and then we end down here, and then we pan back out to these sunbursts. So we'll start with the end, and we want it to have a little bit of a bouncy motion as well. So we'll hit a keyframe here on the scale property. And then I'm just going to zoom in. You can press plus or minus on your keyboard to jump in and out of the timeline if it's selected down here. If you do it up here and you're selected here, oh no, it still works. Never mind. So yeah, about, I don't know, maybe a second before the end, we're going to have everything bounce in. That's our anticipation movement. And then at 5, it's going to bounce out like this. And we'll set some easing on these keyframes. So if you select all your keyframes, right click and go keyframe assistant easy ease, you can turn that on. And then we'll just very quickly kind of look at what this looks like in the graph editor. If your property is selected and then you hit this, it'll bring up the graph editor. So it's going to be a slow start and then a slow out. I think this all together is a bit slow. So if you want to move, if you want to retain kind of your proportions here, you can select all of your keyframes at once and then just drag this box, and then it retains sort of the easing and the timing that you have here, but it will make the whole animation faster, which is pretty cool. We'll leave that for now, but we will definitely come back and tweak these. Maybe I'll just make this a fast out. Oh, I don't know. We'll leave it as this. Something along normal easing lines is good down here, but we'll come back. And then I think as this happens, as this comes down, we want our text to disappear. But I also want to add a bit more of a scale to that exit and offset that animation. So we'll put a scale keyframe on our text scale null. And I'm going to also give this some anticipation that is offset to this layer's anticipation. So this is going to start scaling a little bit sooner than the rest of it. So you kind of get, it's like a hint, wink, wink that something is about to happen. And we'll give that similar easing to these keyframes. So you can use Ease Copy, which is a plugin I really recommend. It's free, and it basically just transfers the same velocity of keyframing. So these now will move in exactly, even though they're different lengths and at different times, they're going to move with the same gusto, is basically the general idea. And it's really easy to use if you just saw me do that. Then you just select the easing of the keyframes that you want, hit copy, select the keyframes that you want to use and hit ease, and then that's all done for you. And you can see in the graph that they're the same. Right before it's about to jump back, we're going to cut the text layers off. So if we line up with that keyframe, if you hold shift as well, I feel like it took me a long time to know that you could hold shift, and it blew my mind when you could, and jump per frame. So hold shift as you're scrubbing around if you're struggling. Select all of our letters, our individual letters, and then we're going to go Option or Alt and close bracket. And then just drag it in one more. So now bam, it's gone. Bam, and the dirt is gone. So since we're going to be spending a lot of time perfecting our easing in this project, I'm going to save myself that time and grab some of these cute little sun illustrations from Envato Elements. A subscription to Elements gives you access to millions of creative assets like graphics, photos, animated titles, fonts, stock footage, and more. Check out Envato Elements at the link in the description below. Now, back to our keyframing. So I'm gonna now animate these starbursts as well, because they're gonna be the start and end starbursts of our animation. And I've got these just graphic assets of Envato, which I thought fit the vibe of our Day for It message. And yeah, make it a lot easier than me drawing things myself. But you could just draw a star in Illustrator if you like, however you want to do it. But I'm going to pre-compose these so that I have a bit more control over the effects we are going to add. So let's pre-compose one, and we'll call this one bottom star. And then we'll pre-compose this one as well, and we'll call this top star. And then we'll go into this comp. You can see here that I've got a fill effect on these, which is already giving this its color. So, and it's really easy to add this. It's just in your effects and presets panel over here. You can go fill and then drop in that. Now I've done it twice, but drop in that and change it to whatever color you like here. Really powerful effect and one that I use all the time. So let's just leave the one they had there so it's the right color. We've got our pre-comp stars, and I'll mention again later why I did that. But we want to have these move in sort of as this comes here, we want to have them move in and scale up as well so that they kind of fill the frame, hiding our text as exit, and then at the start they're going to pan back up. So if we're here where our movement out is starting, we're going to put some position keyframes on these stars. So if you hit P on your keyboard, you'll get position, and we'll set this start position here. And then about here, we probably want them to come, so they're taking up about half the screen each. This is where it's useful to have your guides on. I always use the title action safe pretty much, just to sort of help with eyeballing. If you really want to be accurate with it, you could bring in a grid, or some people like to use the proportional grid, which kind of gives you a few more lines to work with. But I am not a stickler for that kind of detail today. So we've moved the position in, we've got 2 keyframes there, and I also want to have them scale up a bit so that they almost touch. So I've just put down 2 scale keyframes, but I'll move them back because they're our original scale. And then I'm going to scale this one up till it hits the edges of the frame. So that's about 30. I'll make the other one 30 as well. And now they're too close together. So let's move them till they're meeting nicely, like so. So how's that going? Cool. Something's happening. Something is happening, but it's probably not very good because we want them to come in a little bit later. Maybe it needs to be the whole time like this. But we'll also add some easing to these as well. So if we select them all, keyframe assistant, easy ease, or F9 on your keyboard. Let's see what that looks like. That's pretty good, getting somewhere. I think we want them to come in a little bit faster on the position because maybe the scale could take a bit longer, because I want to hide this cut ideally of the Day for It typography here. So I think maybe if we bring our position keyframes up slightly, what's that going to look like? Yeah, that looks pretty cool. And the other thing that I want to do to really make this sing is add some rotation to both of these. So let's lay some rotation keyframes. And I know that I want the rotation's going to be going this whole animation kind of subtly, but I want the rotation to speed up as the exit comes through, just to give it a bit of wapow, as a good word. So I don't know, let's make this one 180. And we'll do, for the top one, we're going to go backwards, -180, so that they're spinning in towards each other, like so. And we'll have that go all the way to the end as well. Since we chose 180 as well, that is just a good number to remember to start them at 180. We'll also add some easing to this, and we're going to go back and tweak that after we lay our front keyframes. Okay, so we've got an end, which is pretty exciting. Whoop-pow! Now we want to match that end to the start so we get a nice clean loop. So let's go back to our start, and we're going to copy our bottom star keyframes, all these ones, to the start. So they're starting in exactly the same way that they finish. We can just move these ones back. And we also want to bring our, actually we're going to cut our type. Our type is going to animate on after these move out, so we can just cut for the moment. Let's cut our type off to, I don't know, maybe about here is probably where it's going to come on. So we've got this, bam. Now we need to continue that rotation and have these move back out. So we're basically just going to do the reverse of what we just did before. We'll lay some position keyframes. Let's also do the scale ones as well, so they're the right scale. And then we're going to lay a keyframe here, but move that back to the start. And we're going to scale in slightly, probably more in, so we're sort of matching that second frame we want, where the text, maybe it can hit sort of this, and this doesn't actually even really look centered, does it? There we go. Where we want our text big in this second frame, so we'll probably go about this big. And then we can move this keyframe back to be in line with the exit of our stars. So let's see what that looks like. Woo! Nice. Let's maybe offset this scale out, actually. I think that might slow it down a little. Oh, actually, what does it look like if we do these ones? Maybe these ones. There we go. Oh, that looks cool, doesn't it? Sometimes playing with offsets and things like that is a way to really make your animation a bit more interesting. Instead of having all of your keyframes line up exactly on the timeline, offset them slightly and see what happens. That is my recommendation to you for today. All right, so that's coming through. We just need to, actually no, it's not. It's not coming through. Why? It's because this value is not the same as that value. There you go. If something is not looping, it's probably because you've got a keyframe wrong somewhere, like I just did. Great, okay, so that's looking pretty good, but our rotation, you can see that there's a bit of a glitch there where our rotation stops. So it's because we've got if we look at our keyframes, we've got this coming in really kind of fast through this steep curve, and then it's slowing down a lot to then go back here. So we need to add some more rounds of rotation. So because this is 180 here, I know that if I put a multiple of 180 or 180 down here, it's going to look exactly the same. So I'm just going to wind back the clock here basically, and instead of it being 180 like it is at the end, I'll make it -180. And then this one will keep rotating in the same fashion as it already has. And then we just need to adjust the easing. So if we select all of our rotation keyframes, you can come in here and make sure, this actually doesn't look too bad, but make sure basically that this, maybe we want this to be fast at the end so that we're coming in and then matching the speed of this keyframe at this end too. So it's sort of a continuation. And then if we want a nice consistent movement over the course of this whole time, the line is really straight and diagonal, just increasing. And then when we want it to speed up, right at the end, actually, it might be better to just make this really tight in there. I can zoom in as well so you can see. This little tool is quite nifty. If you don't have it off, if you don't have it on, sorry, you can just move around as you like and zoom in and out as you like. But if you have it on, it will keep your graph zoom to basically see the full height of all your keyframes, which is handy. Anyway, you can fiddle around with that until you're happy, but that looks pretty good to me. I'm just going to do the same thing for the other star. So we'll make this plus 180 because this star is rotating the other way. And then I'm going to use ease copy to really quickly take that same easing from our other star and ease that there. Now what we want to do is at 2 seconds, we're going to have a bit of a jump back scale again into that main frame that we started with, which is this one here. So it's going to be basically still on the text at the start, and then we'll jump back, and then we jump back again, and we go around. So let's go, and I'm just going to move these into my subcomp, stay organized. So at 2 seconds, let's lay a keyframe and make sure that this keyframe here is the same as this one, so that we have no movement in between these things. And then here, we'll give it, I don't know, 4 frames. You can press Command and arrow key on your keyboard to jump forward a frame. And then we're going to lay another keyframe and scale this down until we get back to our original frame, which was about here, but I think also this keyframe is the one we want. So I'll just copy that exact one there. So now we've got the scale in, bam. Let's give it a bit of anticipation as well, like the end. So we'll move back 2 frames, lay another keyframe, and then in this one, instead of going, because we're zooming out, we're gonna come big first and then zoom out. So that's our little anticipation. And I might just slightly make that a little bit longer, move it all to 2 seconds, and then if we hit our graph editor, we can come in here and refine this motion. So I think I want it to be kind of more like a bounce, perhaps this top one. So I'm gonna make the, see what I mean about this nifty little tool? Make this top bit quite harsh so that then, well, bam, it's a bit more of a bounce. And I think it could probably be a little bit more extreme. So I'm gonna move this one up. This is the value graph, so I can adjust this and it will change the amount of scale. Maybe not that much, but maybe to the edges of the comp. There you go. Pachoo! Cool. Okay. And I also want to have some animation on this text, which is what you're here for, isn't it? This is a text animation tutorial. We'll get there, I promise. We're doing it right now. Let's bring these comps forward. So I've just dragged them out. This is about where we want our text to start coming on. And the first thing we're going to do is scale these on, put some scale keyframes on these individual pieces of text, because I think what makes a really good animation is the same animation repeated. So we have, these scaling happening, we have scaling on the text, and then we have 2 layers of scale nulls here that are all slightly offset. So in these kind of text animations, that's what's really effective. So let's hit S. We've got all our letters selected. I'll move this up a bit as well so we can see them all. We'll have 1 keyframe here, and then, I don't know, maybe 3, maybe even 2 frames later, 1, 2, we'll have our other keyframe, and this is our overall scale, which is at 65. And then our first one, we're just gonna wind it back maybe like that much, 10 or so pixels, so they're all a bit smaller, like that. And then select all of them, and we'll add some easing to this as well. And if we go into our graph editor, I want this to be quite fast at the start, so we're going to make this really steep and then slow at the end. So whoosh, like that. That looks pretty cool. Could even be probably a couple frames longer. So we'll take these end keyframes, and you can also press Alt and arrow key if you have keyframes selected, and that will move the frames too, rather than dragging them. It's good if you want to work fast. Cool. All right, so that looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. Now we're going to do a little bit of fiddly text animation here, path animation on these text layers. So it's really easy, quite easy to do this, and if you're familiar with Illustrator, it's kind of the same process. But basically, if you toggle down into your letters, you've got multiple paths in here, and they're the paths that make up your letters. You can see, I find it handy, you can see which path is which usually by toggling them on and off. And also if you, because some letters obviously like the D and the A are going to have two paths, one for the outside and one for the inside. The Y is only going to have one path, so that letters like that are very easy. But yeah, if we kind of click onto these, you can see which path as well by selecting this way, which path is the one that we want to edit. So what we're going to do is keyframe each of these paths, and it's a little bit of a tedious process, but it makes a really big difference, I think, to the end animation. And actually, let's do this overall after our scaling, just so we can see what we're doing. So if my scale keyframes are over here, I'm just going to move forward in the timeline and animate this over there, and then we'll move it back. So that's our end letter. How do we want it to start? I want to move, basically you want to look at the typography and think, how might this most effectively transition in some kind of interesting way? I think when you have serifs, it can be quite fun to play with moving those. So for instance, I might grab, kind of maybe just see what looks cool, but you want to have something that's still, you don't want to distort the text too much that it doesn't look like the same font anymore, like sort of doing this and everything and messing up where all the points are. I mean, maybe it'd look cool, but for this kind of animation, I think a little bit of subtlety and still heroing the text is good. So maybe we'll play, I think playing with the weighting is also really good. So, you know, you can, when it's got a circle like this, really make that inner tube, maybe actually, I think for this one, you can select a whole path by double clicking on the anchor point. Then you can move the whole thing over, so maybe it's like really close to the edges, so we're really playing with the thick and thinness of this letter, and then it snaps in like that. And if we add the same easing of our scale to both those paths and then drag it back, you can see we get a pretty cool whoosh animation on that D there. So that's basically the whole process for each letter. Remember to set a keyframe on your original paths, both of them, if there's two or more, there might even be more, because if you forget, then you kind of have to start again. But think as well about how the letters might interact with each other, the ones that are next to each other. So for instance, if my D is like that, how do I want my A to start? Maybe pulling this one out is kind of gonna react nicely with the D, but you're also here, I'd say that's a bit too much distortion on the A here, because you're losing that nice line. So I'd pull that up so we've still got the same kind of shape there. And then, you know, for the Y, let's have a look. We'll move that a few frames across. The Y, maybe we want to pull this in towards the A, or maybe you do it the other way and you bring, you know, this side of the Y out. Maybe you bring this side of the Y in. There's lots of stuff you can do here to sort of adapt the text to your liking. And because it's going to move on so fast, it actually doesn't matter too much what you do. You just kind of want to add something else to this scale movement. I'm just adding some ease here to these. So, you know, it doesn't really matter what you do, you just kind of want a little bit of blue bee animation. Maybe that Y is not good because it's going the opposite way of the D, and you kind of want it to flow with the text as well if it's on that slant. So I think maybe I'll go back and do that the other way. But that's basically the process. I'm going to go through and do the rest of our letters and not bore you with that. And I'll see you in 1 second. Okay, so with the magic of editing, in 1 second, I have animated all of those pieces of text. And it actually really doesn't take that long. I'm complaining a little bit, but a lot of the times you look at a task like that and you go, oh, it's going to take me forever. But then actually it only takes like 15 minutes. So stick with it, animators. Okay, so you can see here that I've added both a scale and some kind of like path animation to each of our letters. You can get a bit funky with the O here. You can see in the center I kind of rotated it as well so that it just, I don't know, a bit more interesting. And everything is kind of scaling towards the center. So like I remember I mentioned that Y, I've actually moved that to the other side so that it is all kind of scaling up in the direction of the typography. So now I'm going to also just offset this animation slightly. So let's get all the path animations from our layers. And that's a path, that's a path. And if you go Alt and arrow, we'll just move them forward a couple frames and see what that looks like. If we give that slightly longer time to settle, I think it looks a little bit smoother. Sweet. And then the last thing we want to do here before we move on is offset it so that each letter comes up also at a different frame. So there's a nifty little trick for this. We're going to select all our layers, move forward a frame, Command arrow, and then cut all our layers again and move it so that it's just one frame. I think we'll try with one frame and we'll see what it looks like. And then start with the layer that you want to appear first. So in this case, it's our D, and then your N layer, that's the order that this will then stack in. And then right click, keyframe assistance, sequence layers. And this I use all the time. You can overlap things, but we don't want to overlap in this case because we want them to just come on all together. So now what that has done is gone through and sequenced all our layers a frame apart because we set it to be a frame long, basically. And right now, nothing really good is happening. But all we have to do is select all our layers and extend them to the end. And now they all come up exactly a frame after each other, which is a nice, easy way to tackle that one. So that's looking pretty good. I reckon we can also add a little bit more secondary animation. So also in my original design, I think it's gonna look better if these are kind of split and then come together with this scale movement. So let's put some position keyframes on I think our 4 is probably gonna stay where it is because it's centered, but our day and our it, we will put some position keyframes down and another one for when it's where we want it to be. But then this first one, I'm just going to shift them over using, again, the title safe action so that I can kind of keep everything about aligned. And we'll give this some easing as well. Easy ease. Cool. But maybe I don't want it to start moving until we're zooming in. So that's looking pretty cool. How's that look? Yep, they zoom in, and then, oh, we need to have our text cut off again at the right time. Because we've sequenced it and dragged it out, it's messed up our end timing. So all we have to do is find that keyframe again where we're at our most zoomed out point, select all our layers, and Alt open bracket will move all of them to the end without moving the start, which is quite handy. So now, bam, cool. All right, so I'm just gonna tweak this easing a tiny bit more because I think it's probably a little bit choppy. Maybe let's very quickly, we'll move this a frame out so that it starts to begin. We'll give these, what are they looking like? If I look at one of them, it's kind of a basic easing. Maybe I'll use the speed graph for once. Give it a really steep curve so that it kind of zooms in. Copy this, paste it there. You know the drill, there's like lots you can do. I think it's all a bit fast, to be honest, which is maybe why it's, there we go. This is majority of the job, really, is just doing this. Maybe we'll make this, oh yeah, this I think is our easing that looking a bit wrong. This scale we want to slow in and slow out. There we go. So that's the speed graph as well. In the value graph, looks a bit more like that. But the speed graph is another one which you can use. If your easing's not looking right and you're only using one graph, have a look at the other graph, see if you can fix it that way. That's looking much better. Maybe actually these should start as our little bit of anticipation there too. Cool. All right. Pretty happy with how that looks. Let's add some final effects to kind of make this a little bit more, I don't know, appealing and interesting and maybe a bit more retro. I love a retro effect. Let's, what we're going to do is drag this into, this is our main comp that we're in right now. We're going to drag it into here and we'll call this main text effects. And what I'll do firstly actually is jump into our original comp and cut out the background color and paste that into here. So we've got that on a separate layer. And then what I really want to have is like a drop shadow on this text because that looks cool. So let's duplicate our main text layer and we'll call this one shadow. And we're going to add that fill effect that's still here actually waiting for me. How easy. That fill effect that I showed you earlier onto here. And you can't see it right now because, well, one, it's red, and two, it's behind the other text. But that now has basically overridden all the colors that we had in here. And also is the reason why we moved this background, because if we had left that in here as we had, the whole thing, if I turn this top layer off, would be our fill color. So we need it to be transparent. So let me cut that out again. And I think I want the shadow, as in my previous design that I worked out. It did take me a long time to get these colors right. So if you're working with your own colors and it's not working, don't worry, it takes ages sometimes. Basically, we'll go with white. That's what I've chosen. And we're just going to offset that whole comp. So if we select it and we just move it slightly till it looks like it's a bit of a shadow. So now we have a shadow, which is looking great. But I want it to only be on the text. I don't really want it on these starbursts here. So the way to do that is with some quick alpha matting. So we're going to duplicate our main text layer up here, and we'll call this main text no sun. And then if we jump into that comp, we turn off our suns and then go back into our text effects layer and duplicate our shadow layer. And then this is a nifty trick I always use. You hold Alt and select the comp that you want, and then you can replace that comp with the new comp exactly. If we go to source name, you can see there that has updated this comp now that was the shadow to be no sun, which means that it takes on all of its values as well of that shadow layer. So even though our red text here, our original one, is sitting exactly center, this main text no sun has taken on the properties of our shadow. So now we have basically our text with no sun and we have our shadow. Let me rename it here so we can see it. Text, no sun. We can alpha matte using this track matte pick whip, the shadow to only the comp that is just text, no sun. So now when we go back here, the only thing we see here, we're not seeing this shadow layer at all because it's only alpha matted to the text and it is off our suns. So that's how we can use an alpha matte pretty creatively there. We can also kind of get more interesting with this and use this alpha matte to add in some effects. So I've got some interesting halftone patterns from Envato that animate like this. And I think that'll look really cool, kind of masked into this shadow. So if let's rotate it so that it fills the whole space. And if we alpha matte this instead of the shadow, if we turn off our shadow, and then this video we alpha matte to the same layer, that's going to put that texture behind our text as well. And I think I don't really like the black here. I think it's a bit distracting because we've got such a, decorative text already. So we're going to use a tint effect, which in your effects and presets panel, you can just drag in onto our video. And I'm going to map the black to white up here. So all of the black pixels in that video are going to be white. And I'm going to map the white to our red color. So we get this cool dotty effect in our shadow. Cool. So there's one little tweak I want to make to this shadow, just because when it scales, the shadow I think is a bit far from the text itself. So I'm going to put a position keyframe on the shadow layer. And if I jump back where our animation is, I can see that that really starts here. So I'll put position keyframe there, and then by about there, we're just going to hide basically this little movement in that bigger move. I'm just going to shrink it down so that it kind of sits behind that text a little better. And it probably doesn't need any easing because it's so subtle, but it makes a big difference to the legibility of the type. So that's looking pretty good. Let's do our final touches on effects. I'm going to go into our main text animation where our suns are living and our pre-comps, and we'll add a turbulent displace to these because a day for it is generally always a really hot day. And so that kind of gives these like nice wiggly, you can increase the size, maybe about that much is good. A nice wiggly effect to our sun graphic here. And I'm going to animate the evolution, which is what is going to make it move. So if we actually hit Option click, then we can bring up our expression box here for that property. And I'm just going to go time star 50, maybe we'll see what that looks like. There you go. So this is just going to in perpetuity increase by 50. It's a math thing that I totally don't understand, but it works. Let's also we'll grab this exact turbulent displace effect, copy that, go into our other bottom star. This one's a slightly different shape because it's a bit more fun to be different. And we'll just paste that effect onto this one too. So now we've got some real wiggly suns. That kind of gives it a bit more interest. How are we going? Computer, catch up. So we got some wiggly suns. We've got a shadow. We've got the text moving. I'm pretty happy with all of this. Let's just do a last final adjustment layer in this comp, and we'll put in a posterized time, which will change the frame rate to whatever you like, and I want it to be a low frame rate so it looks a bit more hand done and a little bit more rough around the edges. So maybe like 10 is good. It's good to do this last when you're sort of happy with your animation, and then come back and watch it again and again with the posterized time on, just to make sure. Sometimes if you go too low of a frame rate in the posterized time, you'll miss detail, like for instance here, this is going to jump off probably way too quickly. So just kind of watch it over and over until you're happy with the frame rate. But you can see now that looks a little bit more flashy, a little bit more interesting, and a little bit more hand done. And we'll also chuck a noise onto this layer because why not see how much this computer can handle? And it will also look nice. But play around with all the effects, that are in here. There's some really powerful effects, some really fun and wacky ones, and just go crazy. Have a day for it, I say. I hope you like this tutorial. The end. So there we go. I'm excited to see what you do with these techniques and what little messages you're going to choose to share with the world. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please consider subscribing, and until next time, stay easy.